Society matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Bernie Furshpan of Ordinary Heroes here on hmTv at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Today, I have a very special guest to talk about a very important topic. You know, here at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, we have thousands of young people coming through our doors every year, and our hope is to inspire them to become upstanders. Most of us here in society are bystanders. If somebody is mugged on a subway platform in New York City, most people take out their phones to record that event for their TikTok account. Most people are bystanders because they're either afraid or it's not popular to do the right thing. With me today is Adam Mazo from the Upstander Project. Hello, Adam. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
This is an incredible project that you have, the Upstander Project. It is something that, with all of our might, we try to inspire young people to become upstanders. How did you get involved with the Upstander Project, and how did it begin?
Yeah, thank you. So we started this effort back in 2009, me and my co-founder, Mishi Lesser, really just looking at all the conflict around the world, and not just around the world, but in our neighborhoods, on our streets, wherever we go, and just wanting to do something positive, wanting to do something better, trying to find a way to encourage people to take care of each other, just treat people with respect, and take responsibility for what we can in our own lives. And it started through the first film that we made called Coexist, about forced reconciliation in Rwanda after the genocide. And we really wanted to tell that story as a way to help people understand that that we can connect with our past, and we can connect with history as a way to try to better understand ourselves, and the ways that we are all capable of amazing things, and we can all be capable of horrific things, and it's a matter of how we work and how we choose to try to do better and try to take care of each other, and that there are things that we can learn from atrocities, but also things that we can learn from people who make a choice to do something better to help each other out.
And that's generally a small percentage of the population that either stands up against hate or injustice, and a small percentage that collaborate with the perpetrators. It's the majority of the public, the silent majority, that actually turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to what's happening. And that's what happened during the Holocaust. But since the Holocaust, over 50 million people have been killed in genocides. Now, you mentioned the Rwanda genocide, and you're so right. That was only 30 years ago during the Clinton administration. Most people just looked the other way. It wasn't even headline news for the most part. And so the film that you made, how is it that storytelling and films, how are they powerful tools to make these social changes?
Sure. I think there's just, there's something about film that can activate almost all of our senses, especially when we watch it together in a dark room, and we can really be deeply in that moment and really feel transported to that place. Something that can, connect with our deepest emotions when we get to feel like we're face to face with whatever's happening on that screen, or the story that the people are telling. There's just, I think anybody who's been in a movie theater and has that experience, we know that that there's just this deeper emotional vulnerability that we can feel, hearing people's stories and hearing other people be vulnerable. It can certainly happen sitting on a couch at home as well, but there can be more distractions there. So there's something about being in that dark room in the theater that can really transport us to a place that I think there's very little that compares to it other than actually being there.
The upstanders during the Holocaust truly risked their lives. There were several upstanders that saved my father, the only survivor in a family of 8. They lost their lives. They sacrificed not only their own personal life, but their entire family. And so it leaves a lot of scars and compels you to ask a very important question. And that is, how are upstanders of today different from the upstanders of the past? Is it more challenging to become an upstander, to be an upstander today, or was it actually more challenging back then?
Mhm. Wow, what a question. Um, I mean, I feel like I can only speak for what's going on to today, and even for myself. I think it's always hard. Um, it can be unpopular, it can be risky, it can be unsafe, it can feel vulnerable. There's all sorts of reasons why it can feel scary or dangerous to make that positive choice to try to do something. But I think that there's also we one of the benefits I think of the proliferation of so much nonfiction video and film is that we do get to see more examples of people doing something. And there's such a range. You know, you brought up the idea of, the person being, mugged or attacked on the subway or on the street. And that, that's sort of the classic example that can feel really scary and feel really difficult to do anything, especially if somebody has a weapon or something like that. And there's a lot of other, range of things. Like I think of, just the kinds of things that can happen to my 7 and 10-year-old at school on a given day. And, just to teach them, well, what can you do if that happens to your friend? If somebody's threatening your friend, can we talk about how you could just, maybe you don't even know that person, but that somebody's doing something bad to them. Could you just step in and kind of put your arm around them and said, "Hey, I need to show you something. Did you see what's happening over here?" Just get them out of the situation. Just extricate them. I think some of it is just like I hopefully I won't make too many weightlifting analogies, but I like the analogy of like you don't walk into the gym and bench press 400 pounds without ever lifting a barbell. And it's the same thing I think with kids and with any of us. If we don't talk about it and practice what we're going to do in situations, it can be really hard. We can feel frozen in situations like that. And I don't want to just focus on those kind of interpersonal situations because so much of what upstanding can be about, I think, can be about telling stories and also um, illuminating societal injustice, which isn't just about, stopping a violent act that's happening right in front of you, but which can be about speaking up to try to prevent a genocide or stop a genocide from happening. And that's a whole different kind of upstanding, like writing a letter to the editor, organizing a protest, or organizing, a group at school to help take part to do something to let people know that an injustice is happening, in your community or on the other side of the world.
I think today we have more tools to become upstanders. Today we have technology where we can share information with others, but also use it to communicate to the proper authorities. Whereas back in the day, for example, during the Holocaust, it was hard to communicate and get assistance from other people. I tell young people, and I speak to young people almost every day at schools, and I tell them if you see somebody getting bullied, gather your friends and go to the victim and walk away with the victim. Let the bully know it's not okay. I think this is really important. Bullies are emboldened when people look the other way. And that's what happened in the 1930s with Hitler's regime. This bully got the green light because the world really didn't care for the most part. There was some resistance, but the world really didn't care. So, can you give us some historical examples of certain people, some case studies perhaps, whose courage was greater than their silence?
Yeah, I mean, I think of, I'm going to point a little bit to some of the people that we illuminate and some of the stories that we've told. We made a film called Dawnland about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Maine that was investigating the taking of Wabanaki children, Native American children, through the child welfare system. And, that Truth Commission didn't come out of nowhere. It was years and years of work by aunties and moms and predominantly Native women who noticed the problem and wanted to do something about it. And talk about upstanding. I mean, it took years and years and years of work to build the idea and then to eventually to convince both state and tribal officials to sign on to the what became the first state-sanctioned Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the country. People like Esther Ann, who are in our film, and so many others. I think that was, a years-long effort at standing up to really say, hey, this is genocide. Taking children from their families. It's right there in the UN Convention, and this is what the child welfare system is doing under the guise of poverty, or under the guise of neglect, when really it was just about poverty and about trying to uh, a different idea of what civilized means. And um, I think of, the coalitions of Native folks here in the Boston area, where I am in Massachusetts territory, who fought for many years to repeal a ban on Native people from entering Boston. From the late 1600s all the way until 2005, Native people, there was a law on the books banning Native people from entering Boston. And it wasn't until 2005 that that law was finally repealed. And there were people at the time who said, I still felt uncomfortable and scared about going into Boston, even though I know that no one's enforcing that law today. The fact that that's even on the books and that it hasn't gotten rid of, it's people paying attention to history and saying this shouldn't stand. And I think of people who make sure that those stories that I'm sharing get told. And one other example, so many millions of folks visit Boston Common and the Freedom Trail in Boston every year, and there almost none of them know that on Boston Common, many Native people were executed, hung from trees. Um, there's no memorial to them. Boston Common is full of memorials to all sorts of people, many famous ones, but there's very little telling the story of what happened to Native people in Boston, how Boston became Boston. And the people making sure that those stories get told, that's another variety of upstander that we don't necessarily always think about when we think of interpersonal violence, but upstanders who make sure that hidden histories get told. That's a lot of what we think about in our work, is making sure that these stories that are often hidden or obscured are remembered.
Right, because history is doomed to repeat itself if we don't know the stories, if we don't learn the history. And every generation, I think, is to some degree very lazy about learning about the past, and that's why we keep repeating these things. So I commend you on your mission at the Upstander Project. What is your particular role there?
Sure, I'm what do they call me? The co-president, creative director. I'm a filmmaker. I'm a co-director or producer of pretty much all the films that we do, and work on trying to make sure that we're telling stories that are largely unknown, and make sure that we tell them in a engaging and interesting and exciting way. That's the heart of it.
Where can we find most of your films, if not all of them? Is it on the website? Are they also found on any major networks or perhaps streaming media?
Yeah, sure. All of our films are available on the website upstanderproject.org. Um,
Mhm.
most of them are free to watch there. Dawnland, that I mentioned earlier, is available to rent there. Aired previously on PBS on Independent Lens. And most of our films, Dawnland and Coexist, are feature films, but we have many short films: Bounty, Dear Georgina, First Light, Reciprocity Project films that are all somewhere between 5 and 20 minutes, that are all free to watch through our website. And there are also learning guides, teaching guides for each of our films, that we hope teachers especially will check out and share in their classrooms.
That's fabulous. It just so happens that I am the subject of a film that came out a year ago called The Weight of Memory. It's about me telling my father's story of survival, his harrowing story, but what the lessons are of the Holocaust to my father, and my father passing on lessons to me from his experiences and the lessons that he learned. And it's also going to be featured on PBS next month. So I'm very excited about that, and I want to share that with you when we can speak afterwards. It, it really is. And they talk about PTSD that's inherited to some degree, and it can take up to 7 generations for it to subside. And I can see how some of the quirky behavior that they had, and the easily triggering events that they've experienced, how it impacted my life. I remember as a young kid, when they walked into buildings, they always looked for exit signs, and I could never understand why they were always planning to run. And I found out, of course, in my later years, the entire story of how they managed to survive the most horrific and the darkest chapter in human history. But there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and what you're doing is incredible. Is an incredible thing that you're doing for the community, for society, for young people to learn some of these lessons through storytelling. What do you think some of the lessons that you'd like to impart to young people are? Give me like your top two, three lessons that you think we should all, learn from not only the Holocaust, but all events in the world that are adverse to humanity and society.
I mean, the biggest one that I think of is that if there's a voice inside of you that says this is wrong, this is not okay, say something, do something, ask a question. For the young people, ask the adults in your life, did you notice that? Or if there is something that seems like it's dangerous and you feel like you can do something to intervene, like
Very good.
get the person, grab the person next to you and say, let's help. Um,
Right.
the chances are if you think that something is wrong, that someone else does too. Um, and I think when it comes to, conversation or, racism or other kinds of prejudice that you're witnessing right in front of you, if you're the easiest way to do it, I think, is if when you're in the easiest and hardest is when you're in relationship already with somebody as opposed to a stranger, and to be able to try to find a place of humility and curiosity, which is often hard for me, but to just say when somebody says something that seems like it might be really harmful, can you tell me more about that? And just listen and just let them churn on that and hear what they come up with and hear if they maybe notice that what they've said is really harmful to somebody or really offensive in some kind of way. There's a lot of different ways we could think about that, but
That's brilliant. I also share with young people in terms of the lessons that society is very fragile and you can be easily swayed to believe misinformation and easily misled into hating a group, into hating a person, into being angry, into being jealous. And one of the biggest lessons I found from the Holocaust is that good people, ordinary people like you and I, can be coerced and manipulated and lied to do awful things. And I'm talking about regular people just like you and I have done the worst things to other human beings. But I love what you are doing. I love your mission. I think it's incredible that you are laser focused on upstanders, on that one thing. And do you find that an older audience might have more difficulty grasping these concepts and making changes, or younger audiences are more impressionable and that you have more impact on them?
it's a great question. It's I think it's hard to I think it's hard to group everyone together in any kind of way. I think sure, young people there might be more new information and new things that they're hearing. But we've shown our films in so many different settings and workshops and seen so many people of so many different backgrounds and ages be inspired or be shocked at what they didn't know, or, so many people just saying, I didn't know what, and then as one of the folks in Dawnland, one of the commissioners on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, said so many times and said to me at one of the times that I said, "Oh my God, I didn't know," and he said, "Now you know." And the question is, what are you going to do with that information? And I think even just that question is so provocative in a great way, because it just sits with you like, okay, what am I going to do now? Now that I know that, thousands and thousands of Native people were taken from their homes through child welfare, or that, scalp proclamations were used by the colonial and later U.S. government to inspire settlers to go out and kill Native people for their scalps. What am
Mhm.
I going to do with that information? Am I going to just not say anything? Am I going to share it with my family? And so I love that. I love that idea of now you know, and what are you going to do? And
Do you have any advice for educators and, let's say, community leaders? Any practical ways schools and some organizations, let's say, can encourage upstander behavior, I should ask?
Yeah. I think there's so many things that we can do. Celebrate upstander behavior, model it, normalize it, incorporate it into curricula. Let's see if we can try to shift from hero worship and over to more of a communal practice of taking care of each other and celebrating each other. And no, just celebrating this idea that anybody can be an upstander, that it's not something like, sure, it involves courage and it can be difficult, but it's also something that anybody can do. That it doesn't have to be, intervening to stop a heinous violent act. Although, of course, that is the, one of the more dangerous examples. It can be something smaller, and also giving folks just, positive ways of modeling that. Just simple things like, giving flowers, literally and figuratively. Practice, for my colleague Tracy Rector, who said, let's just take some time in this meeting or in this gathering to give each other flowers, and just sharing something that you like about the way that the other person, what they contribute to the conversation, or why you like working with them, or what you enjoy about being in class with them. Just in cultivating that culture of complimenting each other and taking care of each other. And I love our colleague Roger Paul, who speaks about, how folks in this country are often very focused on rights. And in his tradition, Passamaquoddy folks, Wabanaki folks think a lot more about responsibility, a responsibility to each other, to each other and to the earth, and to take care of each other. And it seems simple, but just to try to take care of each other. And that means everybody in our lives. If we can all just do that, then we'll all be better off.
Agreed 100%. And we really want this world to be a kinder world. It just seems that people are yelling over each other. Nobody's listening. There's very little evidence of empathy. Nobody understands that we are all the same person, just a variety of the same person. We all have the same needs. I tell young kids all the time, I said, if you grew up in my house, you'd eat the same food, you speak the same language, you'd believe the same things. If I grew up in your house, I'd be like you. We really are the same one person under different circumstances. And so my final question, I'm going to let you say the final word. What gives you, Adam, hope about the next generation?
Yeah. I get to see it every day. My boys are 10 and 7, and I see, man, do they have a nose for things that are unfair, right? They know when they know when something's unfair, and they're beginning to learn about justice. They're beginning to learn about when something's unjust, and they've got energy to fight. And I am encouraged at the ways that young people are, to some extent, ditching social media and ditching phones. Not everybody, but they're seeing these efforts to get away from screens and get away from social media and come back to connecting face to face and being in community with each other, having a potluck, having a dance party, actually being together and spending time together. Because I think that it's not a cure-all, but so much of what is wrong right now is because we're disconnected, and people I see are yearning to be connected in any kind of way. And so I love this idea of neighborism and community and connection that has been so much a part of human history, but that we seem to have really gone away from in recent decades. And I think it can be so simple, just things like, there's so much that we can all do, shoveling the neighbor's sidewalk, or hosting a potluck, or, organizing the neighborhood to help out people who are homebound, or babysitting somebody else's children, or telling a story, or volunteering somewhere. There's so many little things that we can do that I think, wow, what if we just spent more of our time doing those things and less of our time doom scrolling and commenting on social media? What would the world look like if we all did that?
It would be a much better world for sure. I mean, there are a lot of good people who are also trying to change the world in a positive way by showing kindness and being empathetic and compassionate to fellow human beings, because we are all cousins. And the fact is that we're all somewhere between 15th and 50th cousins. It's just incredible that we share this tiny little pebble, this little plant in the middle of the cosmos, and this is the best that we can come up with. I'm sure that if we come out of our zombie states, become more conscious of who we are and that the fact that we can do a lot more and a lot better when we are together, when we do it together, than when we are divided. Thank you so much, Adam Mazo of the Upstander Project up in the Boston area. You do some incredible work with storytelling and films to help move the needle, get the young people to be kinder to one another, so that their generation will be brighter, will be more illuminated, will be happier, and they'll be able to accomplish a lot more. So, and to do the right thing in protecting victims and especially young people out there who, children, in fact, that are not protected these days. Were never really protected the way they should be. They're being trafficked and abducted and killed. And during genocides and the Holocaust, obviously, so many endured horrific fates. But we can do a lot better as a society, as a civilization, and I appreciate and I applaud the work that you do. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining me today on Ordinary Heroes here on hmTV. And I want to thank my listening and watching audience for tuning into this episode on hmTV. I appreciate my guest, Adam Mazo. If you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories in today's conversation, be sure to check out our other podcasts here on hmTV. Until next time, be well.